Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Hockaday. I'm the Senior Managing Editor for Asimov's Science Fiction magazine and analog Science Fiction, in fact. I'm so excited to be here today at the 10-year anniversary. It was really fun, Jason, seeing your slides earlier this morning. I think the third symposium is the first one that I attended, and I've been every year since. It's really such a special day. And I'm so delighted that Asimov and analog can be a part of it. So today, because the theme is image, we have an artist with us in addition to authors, which is two artists, that's true. Yes, we have two artists. So we're gonna see some art and also hear some fiction from our writers. And then I have some questions that I'm gonna ask, and then I will open it up to questions from all of you. I think I will introduce folks as they present. So we are gonna start with Kris Dikeman. Kris Dikeman lives and works in New York City. Her stories have appeared in Sybil's Garage, All Hallows, Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, Strange Horizons, and Year's Best Fantasy 9. She is currently at work on a novel about life, love, and zombie hordes in Manhattan. You can read more of her work at her website. Please give it up for Kris Dikeman.
I don't project.
No, you're good. It's better for the recording.
Is this on? So I'm going to read my analog story. This appeared in Analog, and I am horrified to announce 2018. A very bright young man named Frank Wu, and also on the table of contents in this issue, I noticed. And I will just tell you that the first couple of lines of dialogue I stole from two people in my writers group, Paul Berger and Nora Jemison, were at KGB one night. And they started this conversation. And they're not featured anywhere else in the story, but I just stole wholesale these first couple of lines from them. So if it grosses you out, you know where to send your comments. It's called A Simple Question. What if pork rinds came from zombie pigs? What kind of pigs, I asked, swiping my card through the reader. We tried to break the snack machine open, but the plexiglass is too tough. Lucky for us, it's the kind that takes credit cards. Zombie pigs, you know, dead. But not really, Carl sighs. It's a simple question, Laura. Carl never runs out of these weird hypotheticals. If an astronaut farts on a spacewalk, would he blow himself into the sun? How many feral 5-year-olds can you take on if you don't have to fight fair? Stuff like that. To help us keep our minds sharp, he says. That's gross, I say. Pork rinds are gross, so that works, he replies. Works how? It's not like they cancel each other out. Pork rinds are disgusting. Zombies are disgusting. So that's gross times 2. The break room is a glass-walled circle in the center of the lab, kind of like a hole in a donut. The lab curves around it. Long tables with microscopes and computers, chemical setups on rolling carts, whiteboards scribbled with formulas. It's a low-light environment, so it's kind of murky out there. GenLab doesn't cut corners on employee comfort. Before I came here, I used to work at the Value right in town, so I know what I'm talking about. That place was a pit compared to this. The lab, being out in the back of Beyond, you can't just pop out for a snack. So they made the break room really nice. Dark wood tables, slate floor, kind of a Scandinavian feel. Since the lab is low light, the break room has these special lights to mimic sun, so we get enough vitamin D. The glass walls look fragile, but they're super strong, which is good because Dr. Foster has been slamming her head against the section behind us for at least 5 minutes. Actually, pork rinds are not disgusting, Carl says. They're low carb. With my thumbnail, I make a nick against the cherry Twizzler in my pocket. I keep track of every actually. Later, I'll count up the number of minutes before I eat it. We're up to 3. Yesterday, we had 10. I nearly ran out of Twizzler. The pork rinds drop. I bring them over to where Carl is sitting near Dr. Foster. We want to keep her away from the door. They don't seem to understand the concept of door, but there's no point asking for trouble. Her mouth is open, pressed up against the glass. You can see the fungus all down her throat. The lab had been working on a new kind of fungal-based fertilizer designed to suck carbon out of the air and get it back into the soil. Big ticket, save the world type stuff. It felt good to be a part of it, even if I was just an intern. Carl and I were the only ones in the break room when the alarm went off. With the doors shut and the alarm ringing and everyone freaking out, the loudspeaker announcement sounded like gibberish. But we'd been through enough drills to know it was telling everyone to stay put. So we did. Things got bad pretty fast after that. For a while, everyone screamed and ran around. A few ran full tilt into the glass, like panicked birds. Then they just stood there. After a while, they went quiet, staring off into space while their skin turned gray. And these things are like threads. They're called hypni. Started pushing out of them. It reminded me of one of those nature programs where they do that time-lapse things with the mushrooms growing, except with our coworkers instead of an old stump in the woods. Now they're all just standing around out there with their hypni waving around like seaweed. Here, Carl says, you have that big one. Okay, but then you take 2 of the little ones. Okay, thanks. The first time one of them started banging on the glass, we were both waiting for whatever happened out there to happen to us. The fungus thing, pretty sure it was Dr. Agello, it had a vague Dr. Agello-ish shape to it, did this weird movement. Then it came to the glass and started banging. Lucky for us, Carl's screaming drew it over to him, all curled up in a fetal position near the fridge. So I had time to grab some trash bags, wrap them through the door handles, and tie them off. Later, Carl said he'd been screaming on purpose to draw the Agello thing away from the door. To me, it had sounded more like, holy crap, I'm gonna die, screaming, which under the circumstances, I found perfectly understandable. Though of course I can't say that to Carl. After Dr. Agello stopped banging and fell to pieces, Carl took the bags out of the door and retied them, showing me how I'd done the knots wrong. We crunch in silence for a while. There's another bag of pork rinds to go, then a row of chips, then pretzels. After that, it's gum and Tic Tacs and Lifesavers in the bottom row. Not forgetting the big bag of stale Twizzlers we found in the cabinet. There's stuff in the fridge, but Carl feels very strongly we should stick with the machine food because it's sealed. I think if we were going to catch this shit, we would have by now. The break room walls stop 6 inches from the ceiling. You can see the dust spores, whatever they're giving off, all over the tables, but it's not worth the argument. Also, I don't like the idea of eating dead people's food. Not yet, anyway. Dr. Foster gives a mighty wallop, a real full-body slap. It sounds like a brick wrapped in a bag of oatmeal. The glass panel rattles in the frame. I slide my chair back. Don't panic, Carl says. They can't break it. I've told you. Yeah, you have. Alky aluminum. Well, actually, it's alkali aluminosilicate. Carl sounds it out for me again. I make another nick in the Twizzler and suck a little bit of cherry out from under my nail. A pie-shaped wedge breaks open on Dr. Foster's head, and gray foamy junk froths out. She gives one more half-hearted whack and slumps forward, sliding down in a heap to join Dr. Agello and the others piled up along the snack room perimeter. Her body spasms as it breaks down into gray dust. Dr. Foster had told me I had a good head for science. She said I noticed things. She was going to help me get into the Gen Lab trainee program when my internship was over. Carl goes to the counter and moves a coffee stirrer from the big pile to the little one. That's 4, he says. Yep. Not including Carl and myself, there were 15 people in the lab. I'm worried if more than one of them tries the headbanger thing at a time, they might get in. Not that they'll break the glass. Carl's right about that. It's really tough. But I think a bunch of them together might pop a section out of the metal frame. I've been trying to figure out why they keep attacking one at a time. I think they might be, like, incubating at different rates. The 4 that have come at us so far, if I'm recognizing them right, were 3 women and 1 man, all of them under 150 pounds. So maybe, whatever this is, it takes time to percolate through them. Carl does not support my theory. I lick a fingertip and press it into the pork rind crumbs, gathering them up. When I look up, Carl is curling his lip like he smells something bad. It does smell pretty rank in here. We've been peeing down the sink and rinsing with hot water and dish soap after, and using a waste paper basket for the other. We tried washing with the dish soap, but it gave us both a rash. But I know that who farted look is for me licking my fingers. Does that bother you? I asked. What? No. I won't do it if it bothers you. You could just say that. You don't have to make a face. Okay, it bothers me a little, Carl says. It reminds me of Kevin. Fair enough, I say. We're both pretty sure Kevin is the reason all this happened. If there was ever a walking disease vector, it was him. He has had the worst hygiene I've ever seen, and that includes my time at the value right. Coming in sick, sneezing without covering his mouth, that kind of stuff. And the fingers, always eating Cheez-Its and licking his fingers. I bet if you shook his keyboard, a whole bag's worth of Cheez-It crumbs would fall out. The alarm starts up again. It goes for 5 minutes, every half hour. Christ, Carl says. Maybe someone will hear it, I say. Actually, Laura, that's not how it works. I make my nick, lean back, and let Carl explain to me again how we're too remote for anyone to hear the alarm, and the project's too secret for anyone to come looking for us. The bell finally stops. Carl straightens in his chair, and I brace for what's coming next. So here's one for you, he says. If you could choose between 50 years of being happy or live forever and be unhappy, what would you choose? This isn't as bad as the horse-sized duck one, but really, there's only ever one right answer. Tell me what you think, Carl. I say. It's a simple question, Laura. He gets up, laces his fingers together, and pushes his hands over his head in a big stretch. I'd like to think about it, I say. Fine, Carl says, grabbing some napkins. I need to use the bucket. While Carl does his business, I turn my back and look out past the drifts of gray fluff piled up around the glass. In the blessed quiet, I can think a little. After they wake up, before they get close, they're strong and fast. They slow down and crumble into bits after they get close to the glass. Out in the murky darkness, 4 of them, all about the same size, are doing that wavy thing. To me, it looks like stretching. Stretching, like you do before a run, or after you haven't moved in a while. Laura, come here. Oh golly, I've been dreading this. We've discussed this. I'm married. I'm not, but it's worth a shot. Oh, for God's sakes. I hear the sound of his zipper go up, so I turn and walk over. He's staring at something off in the darkness at the back of the lab. We don't spend much time back there because of the bucket. What are we looking at? Look right there. I can't see anything, just a bunch of chairs and... Is that Dr. Flato? Oh man, I can just make him out in the darkness, what's left of him. He got through the back door. Looks more like the back door got through him. All the doors slam shut and lock when the alarm triggers. Everyone knows to stay away from the doors during an emergency. That's the whole reason for the drills. Laura, pay attention. His arm and what's left of his head, they're propping up the door, propping it open. You see, that's why the alarm keeps going off. Carl is almost jumping up and down. He's so excited. Come on, we can make it out. Carl, I've been trying to work some stuff out. Can we talk for a second here? Just stay calm, okay? We can run right past them. Just stay close to me. As he talks, Carl is untying the trash bags around the door handles. Could you just listen to me, Carl? This isn't the right time. You stupid bitch, what is wrong with you? For Christ's sakes. Hypothetical situation. You're in a life-threatening circumstances with a mansplaining blowhard. The blowhard wants to make a run for the door. But in the time you've spent cooped up in the break room, you've noticed a few things. First thing, the fungal mold monsters that used to be your coworkers do this weird stretch just before they wake up, like at least 4 of them are doing right now. Second thing, it's the special sunlight-mimicking lights in the break room that are keeping you healthy and fungus-free. Third thing, there's enough food left to keep one person alive until all the mold monsters unwittingly destroy themselves by getting too close to the break room lights in pursuit of the human-shaped snacks within. At which point, said human-shaped snack, if she kept her wits about her, could walk out the propped open exit door into the healing light of day. So, do you tell the blowhard? It's a simple question.
Thank you so much, Kris. That's weird to say about a zombie story, but a fun one. So our next speaker is Donato Giancola. Donato Giancola is a freelance artist whose oil paintings over a 33-year career have graced the covers of over 300 novels, appeared in scores of exhibitions, and landed him numerous peer honors, notably including 3 Hugo Awards and 23 Chelsea Awards, and the prestigious Hamilton King Award from the Society of Illustrators. Donato was also the 2025 Artist Guest of Honor at Worldcon Science Fiction Convention in Seattle. Yeah. Welcome, Donato.
So when Emily approached me about this lecture, I thought about it and I realized you're not going to see my work because you're going to see what I like to look at. And that's part of the way I like to approach my work is finding the context of why it exists, and why I'm doing what I do now as a professional illustrator. So I also solicited my family because I had never really thought about the idea of image in science fiction, the structure of that, the idea, the concept. And so what I'm going to share with you is just, this is a new lecture. I've never really tackled my thoughts on this, so bear with me as I weave my way through here. But looking back, I try to look at what is some of the earliest science fiction images that we have. And going back to, this is just a few years into Stonding's publication dates, is I thought, oh, it'd be great to show a Chesley Bonestell here. But this is not Chesley Bonestell. This is Charles Schumann. And what was funny was that, wow, I thought images like this were from Chesley Bonestell. And I was just fascinated that this piece is so beautiful and speaks so eloquently to science fiction, the merging for me of both those words, of looking at science, looking at nature, and extrapolating the fiction from those ideas and those concepts. And so I asked my wife, what for you is science fiction? And she said immediately, rocket ships. So I immediately started looking okay, what defines rocket ship? What do we see? And that's when I got, okay, there's a beautiful Chesley Bonestell now. But as I thought about that also, there is no single image that we can really speak to and point to that screams, this is the prototype, this is the rocket ship, that classifies or triggers all our thoughts and beliefs and world of what rocket ships represent. And as I started searching more and more of these images, I realized, wow, there's all these beautiful representations of rocket ships, that artists have taken this concept of the space car, so to speak, the transporter off our world, and run with that and come up with different visual solutions to what these images are. And for me, one of my favorites is Tintin from Hergé. And I used to read these books to my daughters when they were little, and I do all the voices. But I loved also what Hergé would do with his world building, is that he provided a wonderful bit of science around the science fiction, the fantasy of these stories. And so, the large columns, the idea of preparing the ship for takeoff, and it gave, again, even though it's a cartoon, even though it's a comic book representation of the starship, or the rocket ship, that he also captured a wonderful sense of realism and naturalism in his visual interpretations. And even when I look at why I'm doing the work I do, is that it speaks to that marriage of the science and the fiction of these worlds. And so, jumping ahead a little further, the other, it's not quite a rocket ship, but it's the idea of the transformation of a vehicle of outer worldly propulsion, that it goes from now being just a transport to a home away from home in Star Trek. So the idea of rocket ship is being transformed as various artists are engaged with the concept. And I thought that's really fascinating as I started, again, researching this theme of image. Like, there are very few, I should say, iconic images that establish a narrative, establish a concept. And artists are perpetually reinterpreting the themes, reinvestigating the context and the associated images and the narratives around why we look at images, why we are drawn to certain images that are out there. And so for me, one of the big images for me is the idea of robots. Partly because I love working with robots myself in my stories, in my visuals, and also just they are, like, again, one of the most quintessential things of science fiction ever. So dialing back, trying to find like an early representation, this is probably one of the earliest, very strong images, right? That can probably scream in your mind, robot, but it's but I'm trying to remember the name, Carl Kopek, I think it is, that was the originator of the word robot. That helped establish the concept, and then running with that, we see various artists engaged. And again, I love the science. There's a tremendous amount of inventive science that goes into this particular image in Metropolis. And what's interesting is, like, for me, I didn't grow up with these images. Some of you might have seen these movies, or, I mean, none of us are here when this film came out, right? So none of us saw this in the theater for the first time. And it must have been just astounding, right? It must have been shocking to see this character, this creature come alive on film and just like wonder, what am I seeing? Like, what is this thing? And so I think periodically throughout history, your visuals and movies have really provided that. The Day the Earth Stood Still. Again, I wasn't born yet, but for some people here, they might have seen, I don't know if there's anyone here. This is, I think, in 1953 or so. So you got to be like a little further on to have seen this when it came out. But again, for some people, this is one of the typical representations of kind of an existential threat to humanity. The robot is indestructible. It's unstoppable. It can do command of Klaatu. I think it's Gort is the robot's name. But what's interesting, if I show this to my daughters, when they look at this, they'll go, "Wow, who's cosplaying in a really inexpensive suit?" Right? Because they don't have the context. So I think that's what I wanted as I started looking at these, because I don't have the associated context of this movie, of being there, this representation having the power that it did over a certain generation. So the existential threat of this robot doesn't trigger for me. So even though this is an incredible image, right, for some people, so in the genre, it doesn't hold the emotional weight. I think that was fascinating as I'm looking through all these images, like what gets triggered. And I think we all have our own structure of image, right? There's sometimes common dialogue, common images that start rising to the surface that many of us have seen. But for most of us, like if I asked you now to draw a rocket ship, draw a spaceship, we would probably have 100 different representations of the 100 different people here. There's probably no one singular structure that will form that idea. And so for me, the existential threat is the Terminator robot, because this is what I grew up with. This unstoppable force, this violent force, this thing that just kills everything alive. And that for me is what represents Gort for my generation, for myself. And I just got another image of it, just in case that animation wasn't gonna work. So that is like where I'm thinking, so robots, this is one representation of robots. And so I wanted to also show you as I'm finding, are the robots that aren't existential threats, that are empathetic, that represent, intelligence, represent empathy. And so this wonderful painting by Frank Kelly Freas is amazing. I mean, that's probably why Queen used it for one of their album covers, because it is so emotionally bound. It is so human, this attempted gesture that Frank Kelly Freas is attempting to pull out of this character. And I think, for me, this is certainly, even though I wasn't alive when he made this piece, I have seen this image. And many people, actually, can I see, maybe raise their hands, how many people have actually seen this out in the world? Wow, very few, wow. So that's right, there's an example, right? I mean, this image for me is burned in my mind's eye because as a youth, I saw this album cover, I consumed it as a professional, I've seen it all over, but almost maybe a quarter of the people here are actually even familiar with this image. So yeah, this is I guess what I want to talk about, like why image, it's not about the image, it's about concept, it's about context, because I don't think there's very many images like I'm trying to communicate here that have that power over us in the genre. And so for myself, this is the one image you will see of mine in this slideshow. This is my empathetic robots, and this is in part triggered in response to the Terminators, in response to the Gorts, in response to the Frank Kelly Freas, as I wanted to show, and I love showing, the intelligence, the emotional intelligence that I hope artificial intelligence becomes vested in, or the way we start manipulating it so it can provide us that. I am, right now, like the way AI is structured, I'm 100% against its current implementation by the software companies in terms of the copyright infringements and the trademark infringements that it represents. I am, at the same time, fascinated by the technology of what it represents because of what it can do for us as a species, as a culture, and how that can be utilized and further our own scientific needs, our own medical needs, our own even creative needs. But right now, there's far too much exploitation being leveraged against creatives and ourselves with this information that's out there, the data that's out there. So for me, like this is when I look at how I make images, why I'm making images, for me, I start with a very emotional root core of a node, I call it, sometimes an emotional node. So this particular image was triggered by the idea of sorrow at the loss of a child. I have 2 daughters, and I could not imagine like the greatest pain in my life would be losing one of them. And so that's what triggered this particular image. So the idea of losing a loved one. And that's like, it's a very, there's a whole other lecture behind this particular image, but that's where that started is. And so it's a very emotional, very human condition. And that's where I love tackling and starting with my association with science fiction and fantasy. And then I start building the narrative, building the world, building the moment from that. And that's when I make the science inclusions, trying to make the robots look mechanical, look humanoid, because for me, they're stand-ins for our technological advancement. They are stand-ins for our machine history, our machine experience, our machine wealth of labor and such. And so that's why I make them very humanoid in their structure. And I think that's why you might see them represented by the Terminator is also an interesting structure, because it represents humanity, but not. It is a construct, and it is other as well at the same time. And so again, finding the time, turning back the clock, looking back at history, a look at other representations of parents and their children. And we go to Saturn here with Francisco Goya. One of, like, it's not quite science fiction, but it is an incredible fantasy piece. I mean, it's so shockingly emotional. the idea of like, again, this is like a total twister here. I'm sorry, going from the sorrow to like eating your child here to consuming it. But it's just, for me, this is like one of the great images of Western art. And I mean, how many people have seen this image? Okay, well, about half the people. So that's a little better, right? That's not too bad. But that's the idea of monster. So this is where I'm going with this one, is the Terminator and some of the robots can sometimes be portrayed as monster. And so I started running with the idea of monster and coming up with Frankenstein here. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel, Dr. Frankenstein and the Monster, and this is Bernie Wrightson's amazing illustrated book, an image from one of the illustrated books that he did. And it's just phenomenal. For me, again, this is an image that just sits in my mind forever as an illustrator. From the lab, the incredible rendering of the lab and the emotional moment between Dr. Frankenstein and the monster, just incredibly weighted. And it's also, Frankenstein is almost that first representation of what the robot is. It's a construct of humanity, right? So it's the Frankenstein monster is a construct of Dr. Frankenstein. It's a creation of life. And so it's an interesting union here of the themes within that. And for other things, the reason why I wanted to show some of these are the idea of also how, this is from the movie The Thing, where an alien body starts inhabiting the humans, and kind of each human host gives birth to a new body, so to speak. So again, these images, for me, represent where we go to ask ourselves questions. Like, where is the monster inside of each of us, so to speak? That's what that's why Frankenstein is an amazing novel. 200 years going plus now since its publication. It still speaks to us because it speaks to our own internal monsters. And so I like, when I look at images here, I'm starting to investigate like the monsters that we have within, and how these representations of works of art allow us to question ourselves and what we have inside of us, both good and bad. And then obviously Alien, even though it's not, again, kind of similar to The Thing, it's a kind of an alien form that's birthed inside of the human cavity. Again, very grotesque if you've ever seen the movie. Both of the Thing, those are horror films, but they are fascinating because, again, of the meta dialogue here as I started discovering representations of monsters, and monsters that I'm interested in. Not like, right? So again, this is a clarification that this lecture is about me, like about what I like. It's not about what you guys are getting triggered by. I'm just trying to give you representations of where I came from. And when I started, so again, I'm trying to talk this out. Maybe I need to see a therapist now. So it's about why am I interested in these internal monsters bursting forth from my body? Right? These are the stories that get me, that anchor me as a person, as an artist. And so the Alien is the same thing. It's just, again, it's almost like the Terminator. It's unstoppable. It's got to get you, and it's also from you at the same time. But on the other side of that are the empathetic aliens, the idea of looking at aliens and being able to question who we are as a species of humans. And so the other factor, my daughter Naomi actually did this. I asked her, what is science fiction? And she said, it's wonder. And it's that's really what I think really for me captivates the idea, the power of images, when it can spark wonder and imagination and excitement, things beyond words, right? As a visual artist, I mean, we've got a bunch of writers here, but when good writing can do that, can allow your audience to transcend the words on your page, that motivate them to dream, right? To do things and feel things that are non-verbal is absolutely amazing. And so that's, as an artist, these are the kind of images from Blade Runner, the movie, get triggered. That was Totoro before, one of my absolute favorite films of all time, quite right up there, even above Blade Runner. Blade Runner is great, but Totoro is just, that's amazing. So we're going to wind up here. I'm going on here, but these kind of images, so there's a new one, Victo Nye. So she's a contemporary illustrator, but she does these absolutely phenomenal paintings and images. If you want to research her, take a look. And just to wrap up, again, the science of science fiction. These images, this beginning of Star Wars was so convincing because we know that her planet, right, that planet Earth almost, the moon, right, projected in the background, the haze of the atmosphere, right? Our science has provided us the imagery so we understand our Earth. So when we see this starship gliding above, we know it's possible, right? We know, and then it's still filled with wonder at the damn scale at this thing, how big it was. It just kept passing over your head. And then this amazing image of the black hole from Interstellar. Just like, I remember seeing this, my mouth hit the floor, and my heart hit the floor, jumped out of me to see this moment projected on a big screen. Was just absolutely phenomenal. So I'll leave you here with one last image of Mobius, cartoonist. So I wanted to show you all of these different representations that artists chase after in seeking the sense of wonder, and how, for me, again, wonder comes from that great marriage of science and the fiction of our humanity. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. It's fun to see the different images that are popping up throughout the day. We've heard about the thing a couple times today. Yeah, and it's interesting because this is clearly an image that really sticks with people.
Thing 1, thing 2, thing 3.
Yeah, we've got 3 things today. All right, so the next person we're going to hear from is an author. Aleksandra Hill is a Polish-Canadian writer and the founder and an editor of Choreo, a quarterly magazine of speculative fiction by immigrant and diaspora writers. Her stories have appeared in Analog, Writer's Digest, Uncharted Magazine, and others. In a past life, she was a computational biologist fascinated by machine learning. You can find her online or slinking around New York City bookstores. So get away.
So I'll be reading an excerpt of my story, Secondhand Music. I won't be able to get through the entire thing, but you can find it in the September-October issue of Analog from 2023. On the day of the fitting, Hope flits in Ava's chest, a frightened sparrow she might stifle or set free. The day unravels languidly from dawn until mid-morning, then hurtles towards noon so quickly that Ava must run to catch the subway or risk being late. The doors swish close behind her, and the creak and clatter of the car on rails drowns out the rest of her thoughts as she's whisked away from Washington Heights, first south, then east. When she enters the brownstone that houses the prosthetics office, the bird in Ava's chest returns, larger, pummeling her ribs and lungs. She was this close once before, until the insurance claimed cheaper options on the market and denied her the X390. That those prostheses would require Ava to change her bow hand to relearn the violin from scratch was insufficient cause for appeal. Ava signs the paperwork placed in front of her with barely a glance, accepting whatever risks they suggest with the flick of her pen. Her eyes instead are riveted to the arm on the prosthetic's mahogany desk, sleek and organic without pretending to humanity. Soft curves of muscle spilled down its length, matte chrome accentuated with gold, tapering into a slight wrist that bears the company's name. A hint of fingernails carved into the metal crowns the tips of its delicate phalanges. I have to remind you that the change won't be easy, the prosthetic says, gesturing Ava to a raised bench. Her right arm pebbles as she moves her cardigan. She detaches her left. It is cool to the touch, the silicone warming beneath her fingers as she holds it in her lap. The fitting is just the start. The X390 includes a chip that learns and adapts to how you move, which significantly shortens the adjustment period. It also means that it's not designed to pass between individuals. The previous owner had been using it for long enough that it'll have to unlearn her idiosyncrasies as well as pick up yours. He waits for Ava to nod her understanding, then prepares a needle, large, unwieldy. The microchip, he explains. A bite into the skin of her stump forces a gasp from her lips. Then, coolness blossoming beneath her new fingers. She can feel the polish, a groove of the scar in the mahogany. She thinks of raising a finger and, across the room, her new arm serves on the desk, its index finger gently extending. How does it feel?
Did I break it?
Okay, there we go. How does it feel? The prosthetics asks. Like magic, she breathes. Her life spreads ahead of her like a new horizon. The prosthetist attaches the arm, tests the fit of the adjusted socket. At his behest, Ava clenches and unclenches her new fist, raises and lowers the arm. While the prosthetist is making notes, she rests her new fingers on her jeans, her real hand, her sweater. Textures bloom beneath her fingers. A breath shudders from her lips. I have someone for you to meet, he says when he is satisfied. Ava had forgotten that Mrs. Grace Duverne, the widow of the prosthesis' former owner, had requested the meeting as a condition of the donation. The prosthetist leads Ava out of the office, through the waiting room, to a pale woman clad in black. She rises from her seat, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear. It's wonderful to meet you, Ava, Mrs. Duverne says, extending a ribbon-clad hand. I'm delighted to have found someone to carry on Natsuki's legacy. Thank you, Ava says. The gratitude she's expected to perform sticks in her throat like a fishbone, but Mrs. Duverne does not seem to notice. She gestures Ava outside, pausing in a pool of sunlight on the front steps. It's too stuffy in there, she says, drawing her jacket about her. The early April air is brisk, deceptive. I would love to take you to tea, but today's been beastly. Ava's search for a response is interrupted by the squeal of brakes down the block, a prolonged honk. A taxi hurtles by. She pulls her coat on. May I? Mrs. Duverne asks. She gestures towards the prosthetic. The plume of her breath curls into a question. At Ava's nod, she places her fingers on Ava's upturned palm as if tracing a story. Her fingers are cold and soft. It's a marvelous construct, isn't it? Mrs. Duverne murmurs, her fingers traveling up Ava's hand to brush the cuff of her sweater. I would love to hear you play, you know, she adds, as if the idea had just come to her. Play? I always love to watch Natsuki play, Mrs. Duverne says, letting go of Ava's hand. And I'd like to see her progress. Ava fishes a measure card out of her pocket, buying time for a response. Natsuki Saito's virtuosity had been undiminished by the loss of her arm, her swift return to the stage enabled by the X390. She defied predictions of obscurity once the prosthesis novelty wore off, selling out every concert. But the idea of her playing even an audience of one twists inside Ava like an eel. I'd be honored, Ava says, in a few months. I'm not certain that it'll be good enough to do your wife justice anytime soon. Nonsense, Mrs. Duverne says. Just once a month, perhaps the first Saturday of each? Ava doesn't know how to decline. Instead, she proposes a date. She reaches for her violin the moment she arrives home. When she draws the bow across the strings, the apartment fills with the sound of just one note, an A, rich and round, sinking into her skin through her muscles, a solve against the tension and loss that she thought might live within her forever. She can almost hear an orchestra tuning around her, feet shuffling, chairs creaking as dozens of bodies prepare to make music as one. The note fades from the air, blanketing her in familiar silence. It is no longer one of absence. It is potential, an empty vessel waiting to be filled. That night, she dreams of the accident. The details change each time. The black ice that caused her sister to spin out becomes a blown tire, a frightened deer, another driver drunk or asleep. Sometimes it is Ava herself behind the wheel. Sometimes her sister is alive enough to scream. Most times, she is dead and Ava is the one screaming. She wakes with a whimper. The prosthetic is across the room and powered down, but she feels the ghost of her left arm burning, the one they cut from her as a mangled twist of bones and muscle. She grapples for the painkillers on her bedside table with her right hand, her real hand, the hand that can feel the cool plastic, the ridges of the lid, the soft chaff of her lips, and the moistness of her tongue as she slips the blue pill into her mouth. Eventually, she sleeps. Don't push yourself too hard, her physical therapist says during her first appointment, looking pointedly at the bags under her eyes. She nods, knowing that there is no such thing. Where she used to practice for 4 or so hours a day, she now plays for 6 or 8 or sometimes even 10. There is no one to pull her away from the scales and exercises, from the mind-numbing repetition of seeking perfection. Her parents died when she was a teenager. Her sister is gone. Her musician friends have faded away, frightened by how easy it is to lose their livelihood. The only company she has is Natsuki, the ghost of a dead woman winding its way through her new fingers as if stirring in recognition at the piece. This etude a touch faster than Ava intends, that one a touch slower, the music transformed into a series of uncouth squeaks and dissonant notes. When the arm remembers something, Ava plays that piece for the rest of the day until she has given the arm a new memory, until she has made it her own. Aches wind their way unceasingly through her muscles from standing, holding the instrument, moving the bow. They are a comfort, an acknowledgement of her effort as she falls asleep, a nuisance to ignore as she wakes. The pain doesn't matter. She has the music. On the first Saturday of May at precisely 2:30 p.m., Mrs. Duverne sweeps into the apartment and requests a glass of water that she does not touch for the rest of the afternoon. The repertoire is several simple pieces and, though not inspired, it is competent and in control, and more than Ava thought that she could ever hope to achieve a few months before. She smiles as she lowers the instrument. "Has it been serving you well?" Mrs. Duverne asks, nodding towards the prosthesis. "It's life-changing," Ava says, her throat constricting around the words, leaving the rest unsaid. The music has made Ava feel whole again, even with Natsuki haunting the notes. "I'm very glad," Mrs. Duverne says. "It's just, well, if there are any issues, I hope you'll let me know." "Issues?" Ava says. "I know there's an adjustment period, but you sounded neither like Natsuki nor yourself." There's a flash of heat deep in Ava's chest, and she fights back a scowl. There have been despondent days, yes, when the arm has felt particularly stubborn, but this was a good one. "There's a lot to learn and relearn," she says slowly, "for both me and the prosthesis." "Of course. I just want to make sure that you're doing each other justice." Mrs. Duverne is silent for a moment, watching Ava, then dons a brilliant smile. "Come, I made a reservation for a late lunch. You must be starving." Ava allows herself to be swept downstairs and into a waiting car. A uniformed driver takes them down the West Side Highway, and Ava spends the trip gripping the door, her eyes searching the road ahead. A man with close-cropped, tightly curled hair and an artistically yellow jacket approaches the table not long after the hostess has seated them in the back of a small Soho cafe. "Anthony, darling," Mrs. Duverne says, presenting her cheeks to be kissed. She introduces him as Anthony Gerard, a reporter for the Times Style section. "This is Ava, the wonderful violinist who has agreed to take Natsuki's arm." Ava watches him take in her outfit as they shake hands, his gaze resting briefly on her left arm. "I hope to see you play soon, Miss Young," he says. "Perhaps I could even do a profile on you when you're ready." Mrs. Duverne has an eye for talent. He pulls a card from his pocket so smoothly that Ava has it in her hand before she realizes that she's taken it. By then, he's excused himself and disappeared into the crowd. The rest of the meal passes in amiable chatter, and the car brings Ava back to her apartment building as the sun approaches the horizon. She peers into the car as Mrs. Duverne calls after her. "I don't want to be a bother," Mrs. Duverne says, leaning across the backseat armrest, "but I did love seeing Natsuki's arm when she played." "I'll remember that for next time," Ava says, forcing a smile even as a shudder runs up her spine. She watches the car drive away, clenching and flexing her hand. June arrives too quickly, and Mrs. Duverne with it, a thin envelope pressed to her chest. She glances over Ava and smiles approval at the short sleek dress, flooding Ava first with relief, then with revulsion. "This was Natsuki's favorite," Mrs. Duverne says, distracting Ava from thoughts of fetching a cardigan. "I'd like to hear you play it." "Today," Ava says, reaching for the envelope. It contains Bach's Partita No. 2 in D minor. Pencil markings cover the sheet music. Natsuki's. "Well, yes, you must challenge yourself, Ava." Ava barely registers the comment as she looks over the notes. It's a beautiful piece, one Ava last played at Juilliard's student recital, but her stomach twists at the thought of playing it. She can almost feel the arm preparing. "Ava," Mrs. Duverne prompts. "I'm not sure I'll be able to play it well," Ava says. "Oh, but you'll try. Excellent," Mrs. Duverne says. Ava's mouth opens, then closes. That hadn't been what she meant at all, but Mrs. Duverne looks at her with such earnestness that objecting feels impossible. Her fingers fumble as she arranges the sheets on the stand. The chaconne will be beyond her, she thinks, but she might manage the Allemande and the Courant with some semblance of grace if she plays slowly. The first notes march too deliberately from her violin, born of sight reading and attention she tries to shake from her bow arm. Yet with each passing bar, her memory unfurls and the music begins to take shape. The arm does not awaken until the start of the first repeated section. It seems that it is a continuation of her own memory at first, and she lets herself relax until, quite suddenly, one note slips away from her and then another, moving not with her thoughts, but from some drive within the clusters of metal and wires. It becomes a guessing game for Ava as she tries to move the bow to match it, faster where she wants slowness, vibrato where she wants simplicity. The arm continues onward and Ava's mind becomes something immobile. She knows this feeling, except this time it is not a car slipping and taking its own exorable path towards a pair of shining headlights, but a part of her own body, and it will not listen even though it should by now, even though she has taught it to submit. One mistake, then a second, a third. A bead of sweat rolls down her arm and drops from her elbow, raising goosebumps along its cold path. The arm continues to move the music away from her, spinning its own memories until suddenly she remembers herself and tears the bow away. The last note hangs in the air between the two women, sour and harsh, punctuated by the sound of her treacherous fingers still moving against the strings. Ava, Mrs. Duvern begins. I'm sorry. Ava takes the instrument into her right hand and stares at the prosthetic, bending and flexing the fingers as if testing their compliance. A tendril of hopelessness coils its way through her stomach, up her windpipe, reaching for her lungs, twisting around until her breath becomes shallow and ragged and tears threaten at the corners of her eyes. An ambulance sounds somewhere on the West Side Highway. You don't have to fight her, Mrs. Duvern says. The expectation has gone from her voice. She speaks softly as if to a wounded bird, and the sound is so unexpected that Ava must turn to the window lest Mrs. Duvern see her cry. You've been given a gift, Ava. The talent of a more seasoned violinist for you to use to make your own. Just think of what you could accomplish. Just try working with Mainatsky, not against her. Can you do that for me? For a month? It sounds so easy, so simple. And perhaps Mrs. Duvern is right. It is a gift. A leg up after falling so far behind. I'll try, Ava says. When they leave for lunch, Mrs. Duvern pauses at the doorway. Don't forget your cardigan, she says. And Ava smiles as she walks to the bedroom, certain, for a moment, that Mrs. Duvern might understand. Ava watches hours of films of Natsky, gorging herself on the woman's technique and words. In interviews, Natsky has an air of quiet precision, rarely meandering into anecdotes. Only her eyes betray a lack of focus, gripped into a spot behind the camera from time to time, as if Mrs. Duvern were standing just behind the lens, where Ava sits now, watching. When Natsky plays, she transforms into a woman of unbridled joy and pain, who teases music not just from the notes, but from the moments between them, the pauses that reverberate through the bones of her audience. Ava traces her fingers down the lines of the prosthesis, wondering how much of that energy is captured inside of it, and lets herself fall into the prosthesis' wishes. Ava studies Natsky's recordings, listening for the crescendos and diminuendos, the accelerandos and rallentandos and rests that bring the notes alive. Her right arm learns to follow the left. It is a waltz, she tells herself, and she is learning the steps, and one does not have to lead to be dancing.
Huh.
Thank you. And what issue is that in again?
September, October 23.
September, October 2023, if you want to read the rest of it. Our last reader is Frank Wu. He is a science fiction author and artist living near Boston, Massachusetts. His art has won 4 Hugo Awards, and his stories have appeared in Analog magazine 8 times. Most recently, his novella, co-written with Jay Werkheiser, Under the Moons of Venus, a tale of a Princess Altibolant, an Edgar Rice Burroughs-inspired frolicsome sword and planet adventure, appeared in the July-August 2025 issue of Analog. I feel like I should have practiced that one. So give it up for Frank.
Question number 1. If I talk like this, do I need the microphone? Can you hear me in the back?
You need it.
I need the microphone.
Yes, everybody use the microphone, so you need it.
Okay. Okay, all right, so question number 2. Who can tell me how many moons the planet Venus has?
Multiple.
What? Oh, what did you say?
Sorry, none.
Yes, that is correct. It has 0 moons.
Yeah.
And Donato, how do we know that Venus has 0 moons?
I don't know that. It's just one of, I don't.
Anyone?
Too close to the
I have a
sun.
guess.
What?
Is it because it's like all gas? So there's no like stone to pull it?
Yeah, actually,
No, okay.
Venus is a terrestrial planet.
Okay, I take it back.
But no, that's okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there we go. There we go. Okay, so the first slide is a transit of Venus where oh, I'm sorry. I need to explain the science behind the story before I read part of the story. Otherwise, it will make no sense, and that would not be a good outcome. All right, transit of Venus, which happens when Venus passes between the Earth, when we're Earth and the Sun, when we're looking at the Sun, and you can see the dot of Venus, and there are no moons. And the first interplanetary probe that we ever sent was Mariner 2 that went to Venus and, again, saw no moons. So, no moons of Venus. But, okay, 1645, the date's important. Francesco Fontana, who is a Neapolitan astronomer, he has the best telescopes in the world. It's a compound telescope. He drew the most accurate maps of the moon at the time. He was the first guy to draw the Tycho and Copernicus craters with their rays correctly. His telescopes are the playthings of emperors all around Europe. He takes his telescope and he looks at Venus and he sees 2 moons. So what's going on here? So some people think, well, maybe there was a star or 2 that were lined up. Maybe it's a reflection between the telescope lens and his eyeball. Or maybe he's just making stuff up. I'd like to think that he actually saw 2 moons, and which don't exist anymore. And this is how science fiction stories get invented. So the next slide is, okay, so if there are 2 moons, like, what are they doing? In the story, Venus right now the atmosphere is almost all carbon dioxide, and the surface temperature is 900 degrees. So that's not a good place to live. And in the story, the 2 moons are artificial moons. And one of them is creating oxygen for the planet, and the other is creating a magnetic shield. So right now, Venus does not have a magnetic field, but you can make an artificial shield that will protect the atmosphere from the sun's harmful rays, which will drive off all the water and oxygen. So that's what the 2 moons are doing. And there's a reference to a scientific paper explaining like how a magnetic shield generated by artificial satellite would work. And the next slide. So this is all connected. All of this stuff is connected. This all makes sense from the perspective of science fiction. So in our story, what happened? During the Great Flood, thousands of years ago, we know it's all ancient astronauts that like did all this stuff. So in our story, it is the Egyptian god Thoth, who's the god of science, god of astronomy. He lives on our moon. And during the Great Flood, he rescued a bunch of his people and brought them to Venus. And the next slide. Okay, so how do you live on Venus if the surface is 900 degrees and the pressure is like at the bottom of the ocean? How indeed, how? Okay, so that's the surface.
You always say "ow" because you said it was hot or cold. 900 degrees, that's hot.
That's hot. 900 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot.
Ow!
Okay,
yeah.
So why? But okay. So the surface is 900 degrees, but outer space is really cold. So somewhere in between, there's a band which is room temperature. And at that band, which is about 30 miles up, you actually have something like 1 atmospheric pressure, like what we enjoy right now on Earth. So in the same way that the ancient Egyptians were able to survive in the desert by clinging to the narrow banks of one river, the people living on Venus can survive in a narrow altitude range where, with oxygen made by the artificial moon, and the other artificial moon protecting that oxygen from being destroyed by the sun's harmful rays. So that is the setup of the story, which is Under the Moons of Venus, a tale of Princess Alta-Volant. Alta-Volant means high flying. So all of this stuff that I told you is an excuse to make a high adventure story on Venus where you wouldn't really be able to do that. Okay, so this is the illustration from Analog in color. We have our heroine, Princess Dangira. We have the bad guy, Carculo, the pirate prince. We see in the way back, we see one of the floating cities in the sky, and we also see this ship thing, which is the Bark of Thoth. Okay, all right, so now that the preliminaries are over, Under the Moons of Venus, a tale of a Princess Alta by Jay Werkheiser and Frank Wu. The old technologies of the ancient Egyptian gods were failing. The people were running out of breathable air, out of water, out of food, out of everything. Balloons were deflating and floating cities were falling from the sky. But there was one hope. Docked to the decaying, rusting gantries of the floating city was the Bark of Thoth. Built for the return trip to the House of Keb, which is what they call Earth. A spaceship engineered from drawings and copies of the ancient scrolls of Thoth, using the same design he had used millennia before to bring his people to Hypaxia, Venus, in the first place. The Bark of Thoth was sleek and metallic with engine bells opening like lotus flowers. Decorating the side of the ship, which you can't really see here, decorating the side of the ship was an enormous mural showing the ibis-headed Thoth, accompanied by his dog-headed baboon. Thoth was reaching up to open the four gates of the heavens, painted in bright malachite greens and Omniscient blues. Princess Dangira was crawling upon the outside of the ship's hull like a dragonfly, her mechanical flying wings on her back. Actually, I'll face this way for Dangira, so you know who's talking. Dangira calls to the radio, "Lieutenant, is the ship ready to launch?" And the lieutenant says, "Almost, but it's missing a key passenger." There we go. "I'll come in soon," the young princess said, "but the external fuel valve is sticking again, and nothing loosens it better than a good whack." As she finished the final preparations for launch, the winds nearby stirred, and the air crackled with horizontal lightning. Something was appearing out of the whirlwind. This is not in the illustration. Something was appearing out of the whirlwind and storm cloud and poison dust. A giant flying fortress, the flagship of Carculo, the pirate prince, indignantly shouldering clouds out of its way. The massive warship was the Bark of Amhe, the god to whom Carculo was the chief songster. The mural painted on the ship's giant balloon was terrifying, featuring the dog-headed Amhe and a butcher's block as he chopped an unrepentant sinner's soul into 9 pieces before eating it. He stood in a burning lake of fire, accompanied by his second, who is called He with His Face Upside Down. Surrounding them were the damned, bound in chains, waiting eternally for the balm to their sorrows that only a beheading could bring. Below these horrific images on the main balloon, the hull of Carculo's ship was studded with equally terrifying weapons. Giant harpoons and ramming spars for spearfishing other ships, batteries of cannons and crossbows for slaughtering enemy crews, and a projector filled with deep red Tawai stones. When powered, the Tawai stones would concentrate the beams of the nearby sun into a deadly skeletonizing ray. None of these weapons on Carculo's ship were Now, all these weapons on Carculo's ship were turning towards Dangira's ship, readying themselves to destroy their only hope of escaping the dying world. Okay, so the two-eye stones feasted on the sun's rays, glowing, powering up the skeletonizing beam, aiming at Dengira's ship, and then nothing happened. The enemy ship just hovered in midair, not attacking. Why? A single winged figure, dropped from the deck and started flying directly at Princess Dengira, the pirate prince. His helmet was shaped like the head of a jackal, like Anubis, the god of death. His spheric breastplate was decorated with 7 wasp-shaped amulets, one for each enemy warrior he had stung in battle. This flying villain was swooping in 1 minute, then suddenly pitching up his wings at a high angle, allowing him to smoothly tiptoe to a landing on Princess Dengira's ship. Dengira's schoolmates had made fun of her short stature, had called her scrawny behind her back. The pirate in front of her was over a head taller, with arms as thick as a cloudstalker's fangs. He was armed with his battle axe, with its enormous head and the handle upturned at the bottom like a lowercase Greek letter tau. His axe was clearly visible to Dengira, but Carculo did not raise it. Instead, he bowed and said deferentially, peace unto you, my great royal princess." Peace, peace, the young princess snarled. "You've raided our refineries, burned our platforms, sent my tutor to his death. How dare you speak of peace?" Well, if you're not interested in peace, there are obvious alternatives. He raised his axe and swung with a casual half swing. With a great grunt and awkward step that almost made her lose her balance, the princess parried the pirate's blow with her sword. Then she stepped aside for a counterattack, screaming out, "This is for my tutor that you killed!" And Carculo blocked her thrust easily. "How did you learn to fight?" "I learned from the master Sophistes." "Ah, yes, reading and rereading the ancient scrolls." The pirate brought down his axe with a heavy blow. Dengira blocked it, but the force of the blow stung her arms, her bones feeling as if about to splinter. The scrolls hadn't mentioned that. "You realize that I could destroy you at any moment," Carculo howled. "Then why don't you? I'd rather have you alive, as a slave. Could always use more slaves, especially young, healthy, and nubile ones."
Oh dear.
Yeah. Okay, all right. "Instead of fighting me, why don't you join me?" Dengira asked. "It's not too late. Come with us. Escape this world. I've been studying the moons, and according to my calculations, the air will run out of oxygen in less than 100 orbits, perhaps 50. 100 orbits? Carculo stopped his feet in a happy little dance. Then why worry about it now? Who among us wants to leave our lovely homes and palaces for an unnecessary journey to an unknown world in an untested ship? All because of an unproven theory and an unhinged plan from your mother, an unstable monarch who's fallen from her throne. The insult to her mother filled Dengira with rage, and she slashed wildly with her sword. Uncontrolled, unpracticed, Carculo simply stepped out of the way. Then he gestured at his warship, which is not in the picture. The weapon still pointed at Dengira's bark of thought. "Do you know why I did not destroy your ship? Because you'd kill a shipload of potential slaves and prevent us from leaving the planet?" Well, yes, that. But not just that. With your ship and mine, I can conquer not just your city of Zephyrium, but all the flying cities in all the world. Don't you understand, Carculo? The world is dying. Maybe you and your mother are right. maybe the moons are failing, maybe we're running out of oxygen, but even you say we have enough for my lifetime. And with your ship refitted for conquest, what a glorious lifetime it will be. Knowing that she could neither convince Carculo nor defeat him in battle, Dangira turned and ran desperately across the hull into the wind. She leapt and fumbled with her controls and deployed her wings awkwardly. The wind tugged at her shoulders and sent her tumbling into the sky. "You can't get away from me, princess!" Yeah, it's designed to be written as kind of a bull. Indeed, Carculo's wings were a cubit longer than Dangira's, and he had 2 massive engines to her 1. But as she dove, trading altitude for speed, the rolling cloud tops rushed towards her. Just ahead, a plume of sulfurous cloud rose a thermal up to the cloud deck, spiraling zigzag of yellow mist. If she could get to it, she could hide in the mist. But her ship would leave without her. Carculo continued his relentless approach as she rose up again. Ahead, she could see the details of her ship. Ahead she could see the details of her ship. Now an oxygen feed here, an instrument spar there, and the spar. The spar caught her attention. It was a trick she had seen the pirates use. But Carculo was gaining. It would be close, but if she timed it right, if she reached the spar with just the right speed, it came up more closely than she anticipated. It came up more quickly than she anticipated. Too fast. She grabbed the spar and held fast. Her body pinwheeled around, the force of the spin narrowly ripping her fingers free from their grip. Sharp pain shot through her shoulder, but she managed to hang on. Now, facing back the way she came, she let go. She lost some velocity, but now she was headed straight towards Carculo. He gasped in surprise. She knew he'd recover quickly, but the flying princess focused her attention on the instrument cluster on his chest. She'd have one chance. Approaching. Now, she reached for his chest, for the fuel throttle, and grasped it. Her motion did the rest, twisting it suddenly to full throttle. Massive blue flames shot from his propulsion pack, and he darted forward. Right past her. Right towards the decaying, rusting gantries of the floating city. He skittered along the ledge of the city, tumbling a few times, the engine still firing on full, before they suddenly sputtered out. Carculo regained control just before he crashed into an old gantry, hard enough to bend the acid-scarred metal. The bolts holding it in place, corroded and weakened by acid rain, snapped off one by one, leaving the last 2 to hold the twisted structure in place. As Carculo hung, clinging to the precarious platform. Dangira landed awkwardly on a platform perhaps a few cubits away, aching and exhausted. "You should have tried to kill me when you had the chance," Carculo said. "I don't need to kill you, Carculo. I only need to get away from you to do far worse." "Oh? How will you fare in the afterlife, Carculo? Will you be able to stand before he whose feet burn brightly in the darkness, and to say truthfully that you have committed no revenge? Will you be able to look upon the Lord of Faces in the afterlife and say you committed no murder? Your deeds will testify against you in this life and the next." The crumbling, acid-rotten ferrum of the next bolt gave way. The gantry twisted, placing all its weight on the last bolt. Carculo's eyes widened in a moment of surprise as the last bolt sheared off and the gantry fell. He toggled his controls to fire his giant motors, and they spat and died. Dangerous trick had worked. The sudden burst of speed had blown the nickel catalyst out with the exhaust, along with the remaining fuel. Perhaps if Carculo hadn't chosen such hungry, powerful motors, he might have had enough fuel left. Perhaps if he hadn't chosen such large and heavy wings, the weight might not have broken the gantry. But as it were, Carculo tumbled down into the clouds below, his wings useless, his enormous engines flickering in futility. Would he be skilled enough to break out of free fall in an unpowered suit? Or would he bite down on his dignity and actually call his minions for help? Or would he be eaten by the venomous cloud stalker or crushed and burned by acid in the voracious clouds below? Well, Danjira thought to herself, that's up to him. As she flew back to her ship, his fate is up to him. And that is a little bit of the story. I have 5 cut. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So come on up here. Oh, one of these is a centipede story. Who wants a centipede story? Okay. You got the centipede story, and who did I say? You. I don't remember who I said. Whoever I said already I ever pointed to, come on up here and I'll just copy of this. Here you go.
Thank you, Frank. That was fabulous. We have a little bit less than 20 minutes. I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask our panel, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for audience questions. So one question I wanted to start with is about image. I have 2 variations on this question, one for the artists and one for the authors. Frank, you can answer twice. So the artist version of this question is, how do you approach finding images in a literary text that you are illustrating? And the author version of this question is, how do you approach image when you sit down to write? Do you visualize your story before writing it, or do you build the image as you write and describe it? I'll just pass it down the line.
Well, kind of like I mentioned in my lecture, I try to find an emotional node or anchor that I hinge and build as a basis for interpreting works. So as I'm reading an author's work, I'm not just finding physical descriptions and places and character, but I'm trying to find the emotional integrity of what the intent of the author is towards character, towards the story. And I then will make choices around illustrating an image based on that kind of integrity rather than specifics of whether their eyes are blue or their hair is brown, those kind of really arbitrary and really unnecessary issues when you're dealing with character. So that's how I approach it.
My husband and I have had a lot of conversations about how we think. He has a constant just like inner monologue, which is crazy to me. I don't really think in words, I think in images. And so usually when I'm starting a story, I have an image from the story, usually somewhere in the middle, that I'm like, okay, this is the core of what I'm trying to get to. For the violin story, it was when she's playing Chaconne, and the violin gets away from her. It's kind of the feeling of spiraling and loss that comes with that. I'm very bad at filling out the rest of images in my story, so that's usually a second pass, but that's an entirely different conversation.
I usually have a scene or a moment or a snapshot that I work from. In this case, it was the guy who's constantly licking his fingers and has all the Cheeto. I've worked with this guy. And so my annoyance at my coworkers. Almost every person that I write about by name, I worked with that person. Well, they do that in advertising. If you ever see, because I work in advertising, if you ever see a television commercial or hear a radio commercial where they talk to a character by name and they give their family name, make a bet that somebody in the ad agency has that last name, because that way they can't get sued. So I think that this way. But yeah, it's one thing from my life that the story gets kind of built around.
So, okay, so answering as an artist, there's a trick to illustrating a story, and yes, getting the emotional tone and like what the emotion is all about is really important. And but one of the keys is trying to create an image that makes the person want to read the story without giving away the end of the story. So there was this one assignment I had, which was illustrating an anthology, and one of the stories, the speculative element, as they say, was that it starts snowing in Arizona in June. So I could either draw snow in Arizona in June, or I could pick a different story in the anthology to illustrate. So I picked a different story. As a writer, one of the things I really want to do is, Asimov, for example, was great with ideas and plots and just mind-blowing ideas and plots. He was not really good at characters, action, or visual descriptions. There are a lot of robots in his stories which are never described at all.
Yes.
Like, which
Way to go.
Yeah, because
Don't describe it.
we can make up anything that we want for how the robots look.
Yeah. Also, not just you, but
Your audience gets to make it up too. And I think that's key, is leaving room for your audience to project themselves into it, their visions, their interpretations, so that it lives stronger in their voice, in their world. So it's a union of what you do as a writer and what you have as an audience for your people. Of speaking from a highly realist painter, I'm sorry. I give everything away.
Yeah. Oh, well, wait. Okay, I got into this field because of robots, spaceships, and aliens. So please put as many robots, spaceships, and aliens. Artificial limbs are like fungus zombies. Fungus zombies are very fun. Put all those in your stories, please.
I have more questions, but since we don't have that much time, I figure I will open it up to the audience now so that we can answer if people have questions. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Mr. John Cola, first of all, it's very nice to see you again, because I saw you earlier this year at the Tolkien conference, and I very much enjoyed your talk there. I found myself, you were talking about your process and your nodes and all this. I was wondering if your creative process differs between when you're illustrating something that's more of a science fiction bend and more of a, versus that of like a more fantasy or, you know, Middle Earth sort of milieu.
Now I do not have a difference. Before, in my earlier career, beginning of my career, I had tackled my approaches towards commercial work and interpreting literature very more literal, like trying to provide exactly what the authors were giving me for descriptions. But now, as I talked about these emotional nodes, these emotional integrity that I'm seeking, is that gives me the room to interpret. That's why I said thumbs up to not describing robots, because it gives me room to interpret. And I think with fantasy art is the same way. I don't look for the specifics of climactic conflict or heroics. I'm looking for moments in stories where I call them domestic moments, where the characters really reveal themselves. And, in terms of like fantasy, taking a look at, like if I was going to do a painting of Frodo and Sam, I would pick a moment maybe when Sam is stewing rabbits. And actually that's a painting that will eventually come out of me. Because it shows the caring and nurturing side of Sam towards managing and helping his friend along in this path. And that's very critical to the success of why the ring gets destroyed. Is not the armies, it's not the battles, it's the friendship that bonds those two together, and the pity and the empathy that they have towards Gollum that actually destroys the ring. So for me, those are critical elements of character that move us narrative forward, and I do that both with science fiction and fantasy.
So wait, so you don't like painting action scenes?
Oh, I do. Not anymore.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
you did, not anymore.
I did not
Actions in the
anymore.
past. Any other questions? Mhm.
For Frank, I was wondering if you were nervous about turning over the artwork for your story here to another artist.
Well, turning the story to, because Kurt Huggins is the guy who did this illustration.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun and exciting because I've illustrated other people's stories. So it's really fun being on the other side and seeing what other people do with my stories, and like I visualize like a lot of the little details, like where the nuts are and where the bolts are and where like the spars are and stuff. And so there's no way that Kurt could possibly read my mind and know like all that stuff. So, but it's kind of fun seeing how other people interpret that. So, and I do try and put a lot of visual descriptions in, but yeah, it's kind of fun doing that.
You've have seen like a few of different artists render your stories, yeah. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
I've got a question for Donato. First of all, it's great to see Mobius drawing in your presentation. I love his work. I don't think he gets enough recognition for what he's done. But you only showed one painting that you did.
Right.
And it was amazing.
I got postcards here, actually. I just want to like that image down here, so anyone who's leaving today, they can grab some.
But you had the character look like they dropped like a half-peeled orange.
Right.
And right, why did you pick an orange, and is it in any way connected to a Clockwork Orange story?
Oh, not clock. It wasn't Clockwork Orange, and it actually was in my sketch. It was just a round object, and I didn't want to put a baseball or a tennis ball in there. And also, it kind of drove back. Like just again, these are things that you just don't have words for. I just was triggered by the idea of an interrupted moment, and as a still life object, I got immediately triggered by like Dutch painters from the 17th, 16th century and those wonderful still lives they would do. So just my mind filled that circle gap, that object gap, with a still life, and I realized, the peeled orange is, in a way, they were using that to represent unfolding of life. And so that for me became life interrupted, how a peeled orange is in the process of being consumed, in the process of giving life to another. And that moment is being stripped right out of the character, and this. So it just seemed so relevant to utilize that as a symbol in the piece. Yeah.
I think I'm wondering if you're thinking about it, because the orange is pretty small, so it's hard to see, or it would be hard to see if it were maybe anything except orange or yellow or some bright color, because it's so tiny. Is that something that you were thinking about?
No. It's like one of those. I just made it orange because it worked compositionally, and it's a large painting, so you can't miss it when you see the actual painting. But I was going to say, do you have questions for the other writers, if there's anyone?
Go ahead. I have a question that just came to mind, and then thinking about Carlos' story, and I know this could take a long time to respond to, but just anything that might come to mind. So there are a lot of science fiction writers, and others, of course, who write about music. So I just wondered if anyone, and of course your amazing excerpt, anyone wants to comment why so many science fiction authors, and I'm thinking also about Ursula K. Le Guin and others who talk about and incorporate music, and also music with melancholy, music history, performance, so anything that you or anyone might want to say.
I have like one partial answer to this. I think from a technical point, music is mathematics. The way that and I am not an expert on this, like please go and Google this properly, but the way that notes are distributed is like based on frequencies, and there are different ways and scales that like notes move between. So I think part of it is just that it is inherently very scientific, even if it is also very much art and creation. And I think the way that you can, again, break up and interpret music goes with math, goes with science, but also then has this very natural feel to it that feels very, or I guess, science fiction-y, technical term.
I think, and we just heard Frank talking about putting, please put robots and zombies and monsters in your stories. And we've heard Donato talk about what moves him, right? The things that move him are the things that he puts in his paintings. I think that for a writer for whom music is important, I think, speaking for myself, when I write a story, if it doesn't move me, I don't think it'll move the audience. I don't really write about music. I don't have a strong connection to music. There are other things that are my touchstones. So it may be that the people we're talking about have that strong connection, and that's what's coming out in the work that they create.
Can I ask a question?
Do it.
All right, so you wrote the story. If you were in this story, would you tell the mansplaining jerk how to escape the fungi zombies or not?
Well, yeah.
You would tell.
The beauty of it is he wouldn't listen to it. But I have to try.
Okay, all right.
Could you live with yourself? Could you eat the Twizzlers? No, yes.
The character tried to tell him. She was like, he's in shock. So
She whispered it to him, right? I tried, but you didn't quite hear what I was going to say.
I think the moment that he called her the B word, which
right.
I was astonished, stated in the magazine, by the way. I thought for sure Charlie was going to go like that.
It's actually me who erases the language.
Okay, so you let that
The other day I had to delete like 50 things. I was like, did you look at this?
So you let that slide. I was not expecting that.
I feel like it's important.
It
makes him irredeemable.
That was a key word. That was
Encouragement
word to
tactic.
carry the
When he loses his temper like that at her, finally, and you get the feeling that that's kind of how he felt all along.
Right.
And she's like, okay, enjoy the walk.
Wait. So what are the words that we shouldn't be using? That you
I don't feel
It's a
it's
George Carlin.
appropriate.
That's George Carlin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Have you ever
Read the magazine to find out what words do not make it into the magazine.
Those words are not in the magazine. And then don't use those words in your story.
We have 1 minute. 1 minute. Any last? Yes, go ahead.
It's not about AI. I just heard you say that. But if there was one book that either you read this year or you've ever read that you could wipe from your memory and read again for the first time, what? I know. I'm sorry. In 1 minute.
That is a fabulous question.
Okay, you got one.
Sure.
Let's simmer.
And then everybody will go. 100 Years of Solitude.
This is a really hard one, but I'm going to say the first book that jumped to mind when I thought the question was different, which is Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei. It's a collection of short stories. It has my absolutely favorite ever time loop story in it that I would love to experience again. It is dark as hell.
Can you repeat the title, please?
Friday Black. It's a collection of short stories, and it's super, super, super ready. You guys should all read it.
His novels also.
Is that an inverse of Black Friday?
Yeah, there's a pastiche of like Black Friday in it as well. Yeah. It's a lot of social commentary. It's very, very good.
He's incredible.
Okay, so two things. One is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. I love that book.
Yeah.
And the other is, this is something that I mentioned in the morning talk, Nexus by Mike Flynn, which is so crazy. There's an immortal and a time traveler and an alien and an android and and it's really funny and so wonderful. And I was sad when it was over, not because it has a sad ending, but I'm sad because there's like no more story.
Yeah.
And Mike is gone now, so he can't continue it, which is sad.
Yeah.
And
That's
yeah.
my favorite Mike's plan.
Is that?
Yeah, it's my favorite.
Yeah.
So that was Nexus in the one of the 2017 issues of Analog.
I'm going to be more generic, like Lord of the Rings, because I also don't want to have anyone tell me anything about it. That journey and that loss when Gandalf dies. It's like, you think
What?
Yeah. And yeah, that's just, I mean, so like, and when Frodo says goodbye in the end, he can, never, that ring is forever scarring to him. I still get like emotional, like reading that passage, because it really triggered me as a young man.
I'm going to answer this one
Please.
too,
Yeah,
because it's so fun. And I'm going to do a YA one. I would erase and go back to his Dark Materials, the Philip Pullman trilogy. That was just so formative for me. Like, it just came out when I was the right age, and I still love it. Okay. That's us. Thank you so much, everybody.